Okay, Wally, whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Pesach is one of those topics where there's just an endless amount of material about the Seder, about the halachos of the Pesach. There's an awful lot to talk about. I want just to focus a little bit today about the simanim, the order of the Seder. When many families, I don't know most, but many families begin the Seder by reciting or singing the order of the Seder. Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, yeah. Where did that all come from? Who put that together? What does it mean? What are some of the issues? I remember my earliest introduction to this, when I was a kid, we were forced to memorize many things. And I'm very grateful that I was made to memorize a lot of things. Hamapil, Bracha Achrona, things at Mincha, things of that sort. Among the things that I was forced to memorize as a child was the order of the Seder. And I can still say it to this day. Kadesh Erchos Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachatz Motzi Matzah Mora Korach Shulchan Aruch Sofen Borach Hal Nirtza. And that we had to do that in order to get out of class that day. But where did it come from? Who made it up? Where did it first appear? I mean, the Seder obviously has an order to it, but who actually gave names to the various parts of the Seder, and how old is it? The Seder itself, by the way, or the Haggadah, I should say, the Haggadah developed over many, many centuries. The basic format of the Haggadah that we have today probably dates from the Gaonic period, although there were differences in Ashkenaz and Sfard, but it's pretty much from the Gaonic period with some tweaks by some of the Rishonim based on the Gemara in terms of what should be included in the Seder. The Machzor Vitri, were one of our oldest Sidurim, was compiled by Rav Simcha Vitri, one of the students of Rashi. And he quotes an order of the Seder, similar to what we have now, from Rabbi Yosef Tuvelim, which is a little bit different from the version that we have. But the one that we have now pretty much comes from the school of Rashi, with one notable exception. Yachatz is missing. The Yachatz is included in the instructions for Karpas. But again, there's some machlokes among scholars, many are of the opinion that one of the Balei Tosfos of Shmuel of Falaise in France is the guy who put it together. But in any event, our version that we have today came down to us in all probability from the Avud Ram. The Avud Ram lived in Spain. He was a student of the Balaturim, and with minor variations, Rachza versus Urchatz, this is very similar, but they all rhyme. Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Magid Rachatz. We can analyze it from a poetic perspective, but that's not important. There are some interesting, important facts that I want to point out to you, that there are things missing from the Seder Simanim, so to speak. For example, there's nothing in the Kadesh Erchos Karpas Yachatz, the whole order, that mentions the Daled Kosos. There's nothing that mentions Charoses as part of the Seder. There's nothing that mentions Heseba, leaning down. It's interesting. Just to mention parenthetically, there's a very famous Chakira by the Brisker Rav. Is Heseba an independent mitzvah, or is it part of every mitzvah of the Seder? It's an important distinction. According to some poskim, the Rambam, for example, and possibly the Vilna Gaon, that the entire meal should be eaten in a reclining position, in a Heseba, because it might be an independent mitzvah all by itself. On the other hand, as you do each mitzvah, if it's part of each mitzvah, then each of those mitzvahs should be done beheseba, in the reclining position of our Chachmei HaMishnah, which is how they ate. Again, as I mentioned, I think last week, that given the structure of today's tables and chairs, it's very uncomfortable to eat beheseba. Unless you're eating on a couch and you're laying down on some type of a sofa, it's very difficult to lean on your left side while you're drinking the cup or while you're eating the matzah. But that's what we have to do. And halacha l'maaseh, if you don't drink the 4 cups or eat the matzah while you're leaning on your left side, and this is for men and women and children alike, you have to do it over again. The mitzvah doesn't count unless it's done beheseba. Because that's a siman of cherus. That's how free people used to. Again, it's not how we eat today, but that is a vital component of the Seder.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Question. I know it's like lean on the left because people would do that and they would eat with their right. What if you're a lefty?
Good question. It's a good question.
As a lefty, and especially if somebody, were to really drink large amounts of wine, towards that third course or something, if you're not a righty and you're leaning and you're trying to balance this right cup of wine, is it you're supposed to lean like was nahug, or you're supposed to lean in and use your dominant hand to eat?
Well, if you were a lefty, it's very hard to lean on your left and eat.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand that. I would, again, I don't have a very good answer for you. I would assume that most people who are lefties can hold a cup in their right hand.
Right.
And as far as eating the matzah is concerned, you can use 2 hands to eat the matzah when you're leaning on your left-hand side. Again, it's not the most comfortable position. Again, if we were sitting at a table, low tables, like at a Japanese restaurant, and you're all leaning on low couches or low mats, even that today would be uncomfortable. But that's how they ate, and that's how the Mishnah tells us that we have to perform the mitzvahs of the Seder. And again, the Rambam and others hold that the entire Seder should be eaten or performed beheseba, because that's how it was originally done. When you talk about, tomorrow we'll talk about the famous Seder in Bnei Brak. They were all leaning, and that's how people ate the regular meals as well. Again, to us, it seems very uncomfortable, but that was considered the norm until people sat upright in chairs and tables, because that was not the custom throughout the world at that time. I don't know exactly at what year tables and chairs became the way of eating, but I assume it was probably sometimes early in the Middle Ages in Europe, as opposed to the Orient or to the Levant, the Mediterranean area. But this is how it was. But again, at the bare minimum, for the Dalet Kosos and for the matzah that you eat, it should be eaten beheseba, or else basically you have to do it again, and it doesn't count. Again, I won't get into the discussion of how much matzah you have to eat and how much wine you have to drink. You have to drink a revius of wine each time, which is probably, I would say, minimally, I would say 3 to 4 ounces of wine, which is more than most. Most cups would hold more than that, unless it's a children's cup. But you have to drink at least 3 to 4 ounces of wine, leaning on your left side. The amount of matzah you have to eat is a big machlok, because you have to eat a kazayas. A kazayas is defined by the Gemara as a shiur achid. It's considered eating if you've eaten at least a kazayas. How much is a kazayas? And it ranges all over the place. And you have people that say the size of your hand. People will say that half of a matzah or a third of a matzah, a shmura matzah. A large piece of matzah each time. should be consumed, because that's considered achila, and less than that, it's a snack, not an achila. All right.
May I ask another question?
Sure. That's what Pesach's all about.
So, talking about the amount that you have to drink for the kosel or the kazait for the matzah, and the fact that there are so many different opinions from, reputable rabbanim and stuff like that, does that, it makes it difficult for someone to, quote, buy in or accept a certain amount. It's like, if there's so many opinions, does that basically mean that no one really knows what kazait is, and no one really knows what percentage of the kos you need to drink? It almost leaves it up for grabs. It's like, are you going to follow this Rav? You're going to follow that Rav? And why is there such a huge discrepancy? It makes it hard to say, I'm going to follow this, when you have a whole, array of rabbanim to pick from.
Okay, so you ask very good questions, as usual.
Thank you.
We try not to pick and choose. And if you have a certain position, a Rebbe to follow, or a certain Shita to follow, then you try to be consistent. Because there are so many views and there's so much controversy about many of these things, it's easy to get confused, but it's also easy to slide into that never land of picking and choosing which one, there's so many different views. If you have a Rebbe, if you have a tradition, then you follow that tradition.
Right.
A kazayis, the volume of an olive. There's a whole debate as to whether the olives today are the same size as the olives of yesteryear. We won't even go there. How much, if you take a matzah and you crush it up to equal the volume of an olive, that's a kazayis. Now, bear in mind that they didn't have olives in most of Northern Europe. Ashkenazic rabbis never saw an olive. The Sephardic rabbis, of course, did. And that might represent the differences of opinions that we have. Rav Chaim of Volozhin is the most lenient, and he was the top student of the Vilna Gaon. And he says that a kazayis is the size of your hand, your palm, the small amount. Whereas most poskim from both sides of the Ashkenazic and Sephardic spectrum will tell you that a kazayis is anywhere from a fifth to a half of a shmura matzah. Average. The point is, you have to eat something that's considered a shiur achila, and it has to be more than just a cracker-sized piece of matzah when you eat it. So it has to be a shiur achila, and you have to pick your Rebbe, who you want to follow. In the OU booklet, they give you diagrams of how much of a matzah is considered a kazayis, and you have several options.
Okay.
But it's usually it would be about a half of a machine shmura, or a third of a hand shmura matzah is a kazayis, minimally, according to the Rov Deos and the way most people follow today. If you want to do more about it, Rabbi Nathan Slifkin, you should know that name. Rabbi Nathan Slifkin, Slifkin, wrote a whole book on kazayis, and how we came to it, and where the measurements come from. You can Google it. He has a summary online. Very, very important. Rabbi has tremendous essays about these type of topics. I would urge you to check on Rabbi Nathan Slifkin. He runs the Biblical Museum outside Yerushalayim. Very, very talented guy. Okay.
Thank you.
What about charoses? is charoses one of the mitzvos halayla? That's not mentioned anywhere in the Seder. I mean, in the Kaddish Orchatz part. The Chachamim hold that it by itself it's not a mitzvah. Elazar Baram Tzadok says it is a mitzvah, and even though we put it on the Seder plate, it's not listed as one of the simanim of the Seder. There are those like the Rambam who would tell you it's a mitzvah to eat a kazayas of charoses. It's a mitzvah to dip in the charoses, but not necessarily a mitzvah to eat charoses. The whole purpose of charoses was to diminish the tartness of the moror. If you had very, very sharp moror and you dip it into the charoses, which was much more of a liquidy charoses than we have today, it would kind of diminish the bitter taste and make it easier to eat. I will say that the Gemara lists 5 different vegetables that are acceptable to use as karpas, not carp.
For maror.
For maror, rather, 5 different vegetables for maror. The least desirable is horseradish root. There's chicory. There's different types of lettuces that we use. Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rav Soloveitchik are reputed to have used iceberg lettuce for their maror. That's not generally our practice. We usually use romaine lettuce. If you have to eat a kazayas of romaine lettuce, it's about 4 or 5 stalks minimally, which is a nice amount of lettuce, which means, in my humble opinion, that it is physically impossible to eat a kazayas of horseradish root. You simply, it's just, you can't do it. You can flavor your romaine lettuce with it, but to eat a kazayas of horseradish root is practically impossible. I know because I've tried, and you just can't do it. But the maror is dipped into the charoses is really a dip into which the maror is put to take out some of its sharpness, but it's not a mitzvah by itself, even though the Rambam holds that it is. Okay. Some versions of the Seder omit the yachatz. Maybe, again, some of it is for rhyming purposes. I'm not sure. Why we do yachatz, children should ask. A lot of what we do is for Kadeshi Yishlu Hatinokos, that children should ask. And even though I just published a blog last week on the Times of Israel that the Seder is not just for children, but we do want children to be engaged. And we do things to get them involved, to ask questions. But basically, some of the simanim are primarily for they're like stage instructions. But some of the things that we do are not included in the instructions of the Seder. Let me talk about yachatz for a moment, because this is one of the things that people misunderstand very often. We have 3 matzos on our Seder table. Do we need 3 matzos? On every other yontif, manishtana, on every other yontif, we have 3 matzos. Why on this night do we own? Every other yontif we have 2 matzos or 2 challahs. Why on this night do we have 3? All right, we break it, we do different combinations, and it's a very simple answer. It has nothing. When you ask children, why do we have 3 matzos? They'll tell you Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. These are children's answers. There's a simple halachic answer. On Yontif, you have to have lechem mishnah, just like on Shabbos. Okay? If you break the middle matzah, then you're left with 2.5 matzahs, which allows you to have lechem mishnah when you make hamotzi later on. But bear in mind, there are legitimate authorities, the Rambam, the Vilna Gaon, Rav Soloveitchik, who only had 2 matzos at their Seder table. And when they broke the matzah, they had 1.5 matzos. Why? Because Darko shel ani lecho beprusa. The slaves in Mitzrayim didn't have whole loaves of matzah or bread. They ate, a poor person eats in pieces. And dafka, that's the mitzvah on Pesach night, to remember the avodim, to remember how they used to suffer. And they didn't have full loaves of bread. So you make hamotzi over 1.5. It's the only time of the year that you do that. And that's why you have 3 matzahs at the Seder. Nothing to do with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's a very nice answer to give to children. But halachically, as adults, we can understand you have 3 matzahs in order to have lechem mishnah later on. Bear that in mind. It's a very important note to be aware. Okay. All right. The Dalet Kosos, starting with Kiddush, the Seder should not begin until nightfall. And that's why we daven Mara very late the first night of Pesach. We do say Hallel in Shul at night. And we say it again at the Seder. Hallel was recited when the Korban Pesach was offered. And the whole Seder is basically created around the experience of eating the Korban Pesach, except we use the Afikomen is our Korban Pesach, which is why we use the expression, for example, at the very beginning of the Seder, Kol dichvin yesei v'yifsach, Kol dichvin yesei v'yecho, whoever needs to join a Chabura to eat a Korban Pesach should join us for the meal. Kol ditzrich yesei v'yifsach, Kol dichvin, and everyone who needs to be part of the Korban Pesach should join our Chabura. It's very hard for a few people to eat an entire goat or a lamb by themselves. So you invite more people and you join a Chabura to eat the Korban Pesach. So we invite people to our Sidurim. Similarly, the Afikomen is our Korban Pesach. And that brings us to a machlokas in the Gemara, Gemara Zvachim, between Rabbi Akiva or Loza ben Azariah, as to what is the proper time to consume the Korban Pesach, all Korbanos for that matter. And Rabbi Akiva says Korbanos can be eaten all night long. Loza ben Azariah says until Chatzos. Now, even though, and this has always bothered me, but even though we always follow Rabbi Akiva, Kineged Chaveiro in a Machlokes, for some reason it has come down to us that we have to consume the Afikomen by Chatzos. Even though the halacha is you can eat Korbanos until sunrise, that has been the Psak halacha, and most people try to follow that. You try to eat the Afikomen by Chatzos, which is approximately 1 a.m., give or take a few minutes, which makes it difficult in some families to finish the Seder on time. Because if you are discussing, and there's so much Torah on the Haggadah, and if you're discussing each part and you're asking questions and children are asked and so forth and so on, it gets late. And many people have to rush through the meal in order to get the Afikomen by Chatzos. Some people are makpid like the Ramah to even say Hallel by Chatzos. The only suggestion that I could make is, number one, in many families, my own family, for example, the meal is primarily a bowl of soup. Because by the time you get to the meal, you've already eaten maror, you've already eaten your sandwich, you've already eaten all that matzah, and you're full. How much can you eat at that point? You'll have grandma's brisket tomorrow for lunch, maybe. But as I have said on many occasions, the meal is the least important part of the Seder. The discussion is important. The eating of the matzah and the maror is important. And the meal, again, is the Korban Chagiga. So if you have your hard-boiled egg, you'll fulfill that particular mitzvah. But it's important to finish the Afikomen by Chatzos, if at all possible. I know that in some circles, especially in Hasidic circles, they're not so makpid about that. And it's not unusual for a Seder to go on very, very late. I know that my Sidorim go on for a long time. And it's not unusual to finish a Seder at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because
Boy.
there's so much to say. And 2 nights isn't enough to do it. What we will do, tomorrow's discussion, will focus on that very famous Seder in Bnei Brak, where the rabbis were so consumed with their discussion of the Seder that they didn't realize it was time to go daven Shacharis. So we will explore that and try to dissect it a little bit tomorrow. But I just wanted to focus on very briefly on different parts of the Seder. The Shmura Matzah is very, very important to eat a kazayas of that. If you can also get, if the hand Shmura Matzah is too difficult for some people to chew, they have machine Shmura, which you can get. It looks like regular matzah, except it's done by the first 18 minutes. I will give you an interesting halacha to think about. In my experience, and I'm speaking now as an individual, I am not poskening a shaila at all. Most matzahs, most machine-made matzos are probably chametz. I'm getting it out there. I'm explaining. I'll explain in a moment. Matzah factories used to allow people to watch the manufacturing process. But as more and more people became more yeshiva educated, they stopped giving tours. Because when you look at the machinery, what's going on, dough and flour get stuck in the cracks of the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt is running all day long. It doesn't stop. Yes, they have mashgichim along the way with air hoses to try to, but there is dough and there is flour stuck in the machinery all the time. They don't stop after every run to clean the machinery. The 18-minute matzahs, the machine shmura matzah, at least when I was going to yeshiva, we used to get the first baking from Horowitz Margaretin at that time. Aaron Soloveitchik gave the hashgacha on it. The first 18 minutes, the first baking, where they cleaned it at night, the night before, so the first baking, there was no problem. But after the first baking, there was stuff, it's stuck in the machinery. It's stuck in the machinery, and it becomes chametz. Now, how can they then sell it kosher lePesach matzahs if it's chametz? So we have this wonderful vehicle known as Bitul Chometz, the Kol Chamira. After B'dikas Chametz, you say, any chametz that I own, that I know about, that I don't know about, should be bottled. And you're mavatel, any chametz you know about, we say it again in the morning after we burn the chametz. So that Kol Chamira covers all the machine matzahs that are made, and therefore people can eat those matzahs without worrying that it's chametz. But if you are medakdek, if you are careful, then you may consider eating shmura matzah all week long, if you want. But just be aware that the matzah, when machine matzahs first came out, it was a big machlokas, whether or not you could use them for Pesach. When it first came out in Europe, and even though over the generations, the machinery has gotten more sophisticated, but the matzah making machinery that is used today in all the big matzah factories has not changed in the past 60, 70 years. It's the same stuff. And if you watch how matzah is made, it goes from the dough and it gets cut into pieces. But as it's going along on that conveyor belt, there is flour and there is dough that sometimes gets stuck in the machinery. And that becomes chametz. So I'm not trying to scare anybody. It's certainly not chametz. Bittul takes care of it. But the bittul that takes care of it is a b'di'evet. L'chatchila, you should use either the first 18-minute matzah, and you can buy 18-minute matzah, the first run of the matzah, or you can eat shmura matzah. Although given the price of shmura matzah today, that becomes a very expensive endeavor. But there's a lot about Pesach, and that's why the halacha is that shloshim yom kodem achag, from Purim on is when you have to start learning Hilchos Pesach, because Hilchos Pesach is very detailed, very complicated. Just making matzah is a very important, and how you make matzah, how you make shmura matzah, hand matzah, machine matzah. We take it for granted. We go to the store, we buy a box, and finished. But how does it get to that box? There are a lot of halachos involved, and it's important to know what you're buying and who you're buying from. But that's why you have to wish everybody echad kosher v'sameach. In order to be kosher with so many details, you want to lose sight that it is a yontif and you should be besimcha. But sometimes when you're worrying about all these different pratim, it's sometimes a little bit difficult. So you have to remind ourselves that it is yontif and we have to be besimcha. Anyway, there's so much to talk about. We'll finish this today on the simanim of the Seder, what's included, what isn't included. Tomorrow we will talk about the famous Seder in Bnei Brak. If it wasn't Bnei Brak, who the rabbis were, what they were talking about, why they were up all night long, and how perhaps it should affect us. I will tell you that one year I tried doing that with my late brother-in-law because, my late mother-in-law had worked very hard and she cooked and prepared, and it wouldn't be nice not to eat the meal that she made and have to rush through the Seder to make it by Chatzos. Wouldn't be nice for all the effort that she put in. So we delayed some of our discussions till after we ate the afikoman and benched. And then we tried staying up most of the night discussing the Seder. It worked for a couple of hours, but after a while we just kind of got drowsy and didn't work. So if you're in it in the moment during the Seder while things are happening, it's easier to talk about it. To do it afterwards, like the Chachamim and Bnei Brak did, is a little bit more challenging, but it can be done. And if you're worried about offending your host by not eating a wonderful food that she cooked, this might be an option if you're willing to consider it. Any questions or comments?
Wally?
Yes.
Is it possible to get Pesach thick flour if you want to make your own matzah?
Yes. Now it's kind of late, but yes. You can. It is available. You can get shmura flour, yeah. And again, the flour has to be watched from the time that it's harvested, so no liquid comes in contact with it. So the shmura, the hashgacha on the matzah begins from the time the grain is harvested.
Right.
And that's where they have mashgichim out in the wheat fields to make sure that once it's cut, it's stored in a dry place and it stays dry until it's milled.
But you can get the flour retail?
In a few places, yeah. They're not commonly available, but yes. I know that you could probably contact Chabad or any of the matzah places. They can tell you where to get it. I don't know if it's usually available mostly commercially, but I think you can get it in some stores. I think it's available, but then you have to have a special oven also.
Yeah, I was thinking about these outdoor pizza ovens that they sell.
Yes,
because they get hot enough.
Yes, they do, and people make as long as you've never used it to make pizza. Because it's very hard to kosher out a brick oven once you've made pizza in it. But definitely, that the people do make it. That when Chabad goes around in the schools and they make the matzah for the kids, they use these pizza oven type things.
Right.
It is available. You definitely can get it. Not everywhere, but I'm sure if you Google it, you can find a place where you can buy Pesach flour to make shmura matzah. It's fun to do. It is. Make your own matzahs. My father, Oliver Shalom, used to tell me that in Europe, they used to make very, very large matzahs, the size of a table, big matzahs. And then it was his job to take this big matzah, wrap it in a sheet, and put it through the old-fashioned laundry, wringers.
Yeah.
And that's how they made matzah meal. And you put it through a second time, and you got cake meal.
Yeah,
Here.
in Europe, the matzah used to be much thicker than what we have now.
Yeah, because again, the process is changed, and there are places where you can get thick matzahs. There are places where you can even get soft matzah. The Sephardim
Yeah.
eat soft matzah, very much. It looks like
Like
bread.
it's like pita.
Yes, a large pita, and it makes sense if you have matzah that's soft. It makes sense to have a korech, to have a sandwich. Make
Right.
a sandwich with hard matzah is not and very messy.
Yeah.
Or like karpas in there, and then the matzah and charosa. It's but the Sephardim do that. Interesting question, Rav Shechter, about tshuva, whether or not Ashkenazim are allowed to eat the Sephardic matzahs or not. Interesting question. But you can get it in certain parts of Brooklyn.
Right.
It makes
Well,
eating.
Well,
Yes.
I have a question concerning Mara. If Mara comes from the word bitter,
Yes.
that you bittered their lives of the Jews who were embittered by the Egyptian, how can you say that romaine lettuce and iceberg lettuce is bitter? It
Okay.
should be, as the Yankees do, it should be horseradish.
Okay. Well,
You know, horseradish.
there are two answers. Number one, the roots of the lettuce. We don't eat the roots, but the roots of the lettuce are very bitter. The root of the romaine and horse and iceberg lettuce, the roots are very, very bitter. That's number one. Number two, we have to eat a kazayas of maror. And I don't care how strong your constitution is, it is physically almost impossible for a human being to eat a kazayas of horseradish root. Believe me, I've tried. A kazayas of horseradish root is like a full shot glass worth of or more of the raw horseradish root. Very bitter, and
Rivka's grandfather used to do it.
it's very if it's a real kazayas, it's very not very hard, if not impossible to do it, unless you're taking a little nibble at a time, and you can do it slowly. Then it's possible. You have
You take a piece of horseradish,
yes,
a solid piece. You can
yes,
grind it up. If you grind it up, you can easily make a kazayas. And that's a chunk, a couple of chunks of that horseradish root on top.
yes,
That's more than a kazayas.
and you eat it at one time.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the size of that kazayas.
Well, how big do you make a kazayas? You said that romaine lettuce is 6 leaves for a kazayas. No one in his right mind eats that much for each kazayas.
Well, you haven't come to my seder. I'm sorry.
You take romaine lettuce, you crush it up. But you take a chunk of horseradish root, that's more than a kazayas. What kind of kazayas is it? An elephant?
No, but I still maintain a proper kazayas. If you have a large chunk of horseradish root, it's very difficult to eat that at one time.
But it doesn't have to be that large, just the size of an olive. Because the root is solid.
Root is solid.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of liquid in there too. But again,
It's pretty solid.
the reason I will say this, and I hate to burst your bubble about Yeki Minhagim, but it's not just the Yekis, but most of Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, used horseradish root because they didn't have green leafy vegetables. They didn't have lettuce in Germany. They didn't have lettuce in Lithuania or Poland.
Potatoes for karpas for that reason.
That's right. These potatoes. But horseradish root was available. Lettuce was not. So that's what they ate. Again, if you look in the Gemara's listing of different vegetables that you could use for maror, the horseradish root is the least desirable. There's chicory, there's different types of lettuce, but horseradish root is the least preferable because it's very hard to eat a proper amount of it.
Rabbi, where does health come into it? I know someone I'm related to that person. It is not my husband, thank God. Who is so mock-peed about eating the maror that he turns as red as a tomato. He starts choking. He's like, his eyes are tearing. Like, what's the chachma? Yeah, I get it. Do a mitzvah, but like, it's not, thank God, to the degree of sakanat nefesh, like mamish, but still, it's like, what are you trying to prove?
He's trying to put macho into mitzvah.
Okay.
That's what I can tell you. What we do is we use the romaine lettuce, but we sprinkle on it, crushed amaro just for the flavor, but not a kazaya's worth.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a
See you
decent, Wally, have a decent Pesach.
You too. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Yanish, Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Yanis, when are you traveling?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay. Are you going to be on tomorrow morning?
I don't know. I will be at the airport before my flight is. Actually, my flight is when you start. So I may be coming to say hi.
Okay, so have a safe trip
from the plane.
Have a safe trip and a chag kosher v'sameach.
Yanish, while you're in Poland, do they grow parsley in Poland today?
Yeah, why not?
All right, so Yekis use parsley for
okay. Hey, I can show you parsley.
See?
You wanna see?
How come they use potatoes at the Seder?
See, this is parsley.
But why in Poland did they use potatoes?
I don't know.
Right.
You have to ask Chabad.